firm's most valuable asset is not cutting-edge technology, but the people using it. What is it about today's landscape that's making companies hyper-focused on star performers?
They're using AI and technology to have a competitive advantage, but so critical to retain them because they are so unique in today's space.
What in your experience is the common trait?
The high achievers are not trying more than they fear failing.
This age of high performance. Hi, I'm Jill Wilfong, Chief Marketing Officer for Korn Ferry, and this is Briefings, our deep dive into topics that corporate leaders need to care about. CEOs sure have a lot on their plate. Multiple wars, inflation, tariffs, all affecting business. And then there's the biggest challenge of all, AI, the cost of which is now a staggering $150 billion this year alone. But the big secret of the AI revolution may be that a firm's most valuable asset is not cutting-edge technology, but the people using it, all of which is causing firms to laser focus on one type of employee, the top performer. Indeed, in this environment, companies are realizing that the people with the critical skills and drive are not just a nice to have, but a must have. That is if they want to survive. So, given that, let's take a serious look at what exactly defines a top performer today and what smart leaders are doing to develop and hang on to them in this age of high performance. Before we start, if you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts on this topic. You can also read about this subject today in a great feature in our Briefings magazine, available at airports and online. I'm joined now by Michelle Capra, Vice President of Korn Ferry's RPO practice. She is front and center in helping company leaders find the most talented people on the planet. So her thoughts on this will be a good indication of where things are headed. Michelle, it's really great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Jill. I'm so excited to connect on this topic.
So, Michelle, for the longest time, firms placed an emphasis on rewarding all employees rather than select stars. But that's all changed. This year, many companies actually may discontinue these so-called peanut butter raises, where pay bumps are spread evenly across the workforce, in favor of paying high performers disproportionately more. What is it about today's landscape that's making companies hyper-focus on star performers right now?
When you think about traditionally what an individual was responsible for in terms of being a high performer, they executed, they delivered effectively, they were able to manage teams or functions. But today, now they're coupling that with AI, right, and technology. So they're really having to take that a step further, and they're using AI and technology to have a competitive advantage. These are the individuals that are going to lead the charge. They're going to take and accelerate other teams to deliver as well. So it's so critical to retain them because they are so unique in today's space.
You're, of course, heavily involved with recruiting these A players to companies, but many HR experts say a glut of AI-powered job applications have actually made it harder to separate the real star candidates from the fakes. What are companies doing differently now, if anything, to identify those real top people?
It's a real challenge, Jill, right? We're seeing so many applications come through and so many resumes that match the job description. And what organizations are now doing is they're not just looking at the resume anymore. They're looking at the information on the resume and how they got to those achievements, what decisions were made in order to execute on those achievements that people are articulating. And that's actually requiring that genuine connection. So we're seeing organizations actually bring candidates back on site for interviews because they want to have that human connection right out of the gate.
Okay, now when you walk into the ring with the #1 heavyweight of the world, you'll be ready, won't you? Why? Because I waited for 50 years to make you ready. You'll be able to spit nails, kid.
That's a scene from the movie Rocky II, where Sylvester Stallone trained with his coach to be a top boxer. To develop top talent in the business world, it's, of course, companies that do the training. And good training seems like a must-have, given one survey found 2/3 of managers and executives say that most recent hires were not fully prepared when they kind of first came into their role. So what are some practical things that firms should be doing to develop, let's say, average performers into top performers?
I think the biggest mistake is training is critical, but it's not the only component, right? It's a foundation and toolkit that allows people to be successful and really accelerate into top performers. So when you think about training as one pillar, there's mentorship, there's having a good leader that's driving and supporting you. And then there's practice in your role, right? So athletes practice every day for competitions. It's the same thought there. If you're working in customer service, you may want to do a simulation that walks you through that experience and what a challenging customer could be. If you're working as a consultant, you might want to do a mock presentation for a client so that you're practicing and able to work out any areas of opportunity before you actually are in front of a client or a customer supporting a similar situation.
I do want to touch briefly on Gen Z. They may be the most AI savvy in the workplace, but the unemployment rate for new college grads is still noticeably higher than average. Are there any specific skills this generation is missing that's making it harder for them to be seen as high performers?
Gen Z, I think there's so many great things that they bring to the workforce, and they're all going to make us work smarter, not harder. But I do think the area for them to really hone in on is problem solving and communication. So they can build a tool with an AI very quickly, but they need to be able to articulate what that tool is doing, right? What's the ROI on that for their client? What's the why behind that? And it's leading them on that journey and path in terms of how they get to those answers. So it's supporting them as a leader when they join organizations to make sure that the AI piece is critical, but also the human component and communication are just as important.
Michelle, thank you so much for joining me and for this, as always, thought-provoking chat.
Thank you so much, Jill. Have a great day.
So we've looked at what companies are doing to identify and train top performers. After the break, we'll speak to a success strategist who worked with astronauts, Olympic champions, and Nobel laureates to get her tips on what people can do to be seen as top performers in today's competitive environment. So stay with us.
Hi, and welcome to This Week in Leadership. I'm Rupak Bhattacharya, and here's a quick look at what else is happening in business.
I have 0 degrees. I have no degree.
More companies are dropping college degree requirements. With employer focus shifting to skills, nearly a third of paid job postings on LinkedIn now omit professional degree requirements, up from 19% in 2019. While employers hope the shift will help solve ongoing talent shortages, many are still figuring out which skills matter most, especially in an AI era where the skills one needs today may not apply tomorrow.
What does the CEO need in the CFO?
The biggest threat to some CEOs may not be the competition. It could be their own CFO. In a recent survey, 1 in 4 CEOs said their CFO poses the greatest risk to their job security. Experts say boards should step in the event of a rift because a misalignment at the top between corporate and financial strategy can quickly become a company-wide problem.
The biggest obstacle for recent college graduates to get a job and to move up is not artificial intelligence.
AI is often blamed for the struggles facing recent college grads, but remote work may be the bigger factor. A new study finds nearly 2/3 of the rise in graduate unemployment is linked to the rise in remote work. Experts say it reflects a gap in management where managers don't know how to onboard and develop recent grads. And they urge hiring at least some recent grads for remote work, if only to keep a pool of workers ready for future developments. For more insights from This Week in Leadership, head to kornferry.com/insights. Now back to Jill in our episode, The Age of High Performance.
One of the patterns that you spot really quickly if you interview hundreds of world-class performers is the fact that they have consistent morning routines. Gratitude is a common element, gratitude lists, and this is, say, naming 3 things that you're grateful for each morning.
We're back. In the first half of this episode, we discussed how companies are assessing and acquiring top performers. But now let's flip the script and look at what employees can do to be seen as a top talent. To help us with that, I'm joined by Ruth Gauthier, a speaker and executive coach for high achievers. She's worked with Nobel Prize winners, Olympic champions, and top 500 executives, Fortune 500 executives. So I'd say she knows a thing or two about what it takes to reach the top. Ruth, it's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
That last clip featured podcaster Tim Ferriss talking about one commonality he's observed from interviewing many high performers. Ruth, as I just mentioned, you've worked with some very high achieving people yourself. What in your experience is the common trait or traits that set them apart from people who don't quite live up to their full potential?
There are actually 4 common traits amongst all of these high performers. They've tapped into what is called their intrinsic motivation. That is something that comes from within. That is that fire in your belly. That's number 1. The second thing they do is it's the way they approach challenges. Most people don't try because they fear failing, but the high performers, the high achievers, fear not trying more than they fear failing. They look at challenge as a puzzle to be solved. Number 3, they never rest on their laurels. So what made them successful early in their careers, what they will continue doing later. And the last thing is opening your mind up to new knowledge so that you can connect dots that other people don't yet see. You can listen to podcasts such as this one. You can take LinkedIn learning courses. You can watch webinars. You can talk to people. In fact, every single high performer who I've ever interviewed surrounded themselves not just with one, but with a team of mentors.
Of course, there's also the scenario where someone at work may in fact be a top performer, but isn't seen to be so by their boss. And you've said that often that comes down to being a fixer versus a builder. What do you mean by that?
High performers tend to get overlooked because they are so good. They are putting out fires that they never started. They are executing. They're the ones who get things done. But if you're always solving a crisis, you are then seen as that fixer instead of the leader who is building and strategizing toward the future. So it's a signal that you are sending to the leadership, and you have to change the signals that you're sending if you want to change the perspective from being a fixer to being a builder.
Hi, I'm Jin Chow. I'm your new assistant.
Cool, I was wondering about that. Nice to meet you.
I was an intern this morning, but when a desk opens up, the interns get a chance to interview. And guess what? Nobody wanted to work in your department because it's not actual fashion. So I just got it. Isn't that cool?
Very.
That's a clip from The Devil Wears Prada 2, where an assistant tries to be friendly with her new boss and says the absolute wrong thing. So on that note, Ruth, you actually have a clear strategy on how not to communicate with the boss when it comes to being seen as a high achiever. Tell us more.
Yes. So very often people think, oh, let me just close out the week by sending my boss the 3 things that I accomplished this week. And that's great the first week. It might even be great the second week. By the third week, it's noise. It's expected that Friday at 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm going to receive an email with the 3 things that you'll accomplish this week. At this point, it's almost like you're fishing for what to email.
Okay, so now how should folks be connecting with their manager if they really want to be seen as top talent?
What if instead you sent an email as things were occurring and you would say, this is what I just accomplished, or this is the fire I just put out, or even better, this is what I prevented from happening. And this is what it saved. And you want to use percentages, numbers, $sign, so they understand the impact of it. And you want to share it in real time. But here's what you need to put on the top of the email. For your information, no response necessary. Now, the reason that's so important is if you send it without it, it's as if you're expecting a response. Now the leader needs to stop what they're doing, think about a response, and now it becomes annoying. But if it's for your information only, this is good because now when you're sending emails, there's going to be a value to it. And remember, the leader has a boss too, and they need bragging rights of what they can talk to their bosses about. You've just handed it to them on a silver platter.
I love it. Some really fantastic tips. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
The executive producer of Briefings is Jonathan Dahl. Today's episode was produced by Rupak Bhattacharya and Zachary Dorr. and it was edited by Jaron Henry McRae. It contains reporting by Russell Perlman, Ariane Cohen, and Peter Loria. Our video segment contains original artwork by Fraser Milton, Haley Kennel, Jonathan Pink, and Sasha Kotschik. And our web operations are managed by Ed McLaurin. Don't forget to read our magazine, available at newsstands and at kornferry.com/briefings. That's it for Korn Ferry Briefings. I'm Jill Wiltfong. See you next time.